Welcome to another episode of the Built for Growth podcast. I'm excited to have you here with me today as I sit down with Steven Cohen. Now, Steven Cohen, I ran into here at Origin Studios where I produce my podcast because he produces his podcast here too. And it's called the Millennial Millionaire. And I don't usually, throw other people's podcasts out in the intro of my podcast, but I just think it deserves a shout right off the get. And it is how we met. And I had a wonderful episode with him. Very much enjoyed sitting down and talking with him on his podcast, but even more so being able to pick his brain on my podcast because he really helped me to understand breaking the financial mold and what that really takes from a business standpoint. We talk about things like being bold. Like, what does that mean? We talked about a scarcity mentality. Ooh. That's one you are definitely going to want to take notes on. Don't do that. Don't have a scarcity mentality. We get into it. And we talk about the difference between poor and broke. Poor is kind of like a mindset, a lifestyle. Broke is temporary. We dive into that in all kinds of ways and really how you can elevate yourself out of the system that is kind of designed, if you just fall in line, to keep you stagnant. So I think there's a lot of great takeaways in this podcast, and I know you are going to love it. You might want to get your notepad out. And as always, thanks for listening. Well, Steven, thank you so much for being a return guest on my podcast now, because we did one episode on your podcast, which I think went pretty well. I listened back to it, and I was like, okay, I didn't sound like an idiot.
I thought it was great.
I thought it was pretty good. And funny story is, I was trunk or treating with my kids on, I think it was Wednesday, right before Halloween. So Halloween was on Friday. And we live just down the street from the Church of Latter-day Saints. So we have some friends that go there. And long story short, I'm trick or treating, and I wasn't in costume, wasn't prepared on Wednesday. So just out with my kids, and this guy stops me. He goes, "Are you Miesha Tate?" And I said, "Yeah." And I'm used to, people seeing me sometimes for being a fighter, or maybe having been on Celebrity Big Brother 3. But he stopped me because I was a guest on your podcast.
Daniel.
Yeah.
He told me.
He told you about it. Okay, great. So are you guys friends?
Yeah, Daniel's the man. So he's he's actually the top sales rep in the country for my company. So he's like the number one solar salesman, not just in my company, but in the industry. So he's a big deal. Not as big of a deal as you, but he's a big deal in the direct sales solar world.
No, that's great. And I thought he was so nice. And he even pulled up his notes and showed me some of the quotes that he had written down from the podcast that we did together. And so I was like, I think it was impactful, at least to run into someone like that. I wasn't sure if you guys knew each other, but I thought that was neat.
Daniel's the man. He texted me.
Yeah.
Like, Miesha Tate. I was like, yeah.
That's so cool. I love it. So I figured I would kick off with a little funny story like that. So anyways, Millennial Millionaire, it's a fantastic podcast. I've really enjoyed some of your listens. And I like your solo episodes a lot, which is kind of different because I usually listen to podcasts that have guests on them. But your solo episodes just kill it because it's just like direct to the point, information, like, how do I make money? So let's just jump in with scarcity mentality, because I feel like we were talking a lot in the episode that we did about mentality. I feel like it's just a good continuation and jumping off point. I am somebody who admittedly jumps often before the net is there. We talked at length about that. There's the mentality that goes with success. And sometimes people think that I've just gotten lucky, or that I'm just, sometimes people even really think that I'm not intelligent for doing that I don't plan enough. And it's not that I don't plan. It's just that I've realized that I learn so much more faster when I'm just not afraid to fuck it up. Right? I'm willing to gamble on myself, because I'm willing to bet that even if I mess it up, that I have a strong learning curve, and it will actually guide me the right way faster than if I just try to delay and plan for things that I can't really necessarily plan for. So I know that scarcity mindset sort of goes along with that, in that people are sometimes reserved, and they're not ready to go for it, or to spend it, or to do it, or to try it. So can we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, scarcity mindset. I think most people have it because I think as humans, that is kind of how we are designed and built.
Absolutely.
If you go back 10, 20, 50,000 years ago, we were designed to survive when saber-toothed tigers were trying to kill us and there was famine and you needed shelter. And as human beings, we've adapted and evolved, but our brain, our mind, our 10,000-year-old mind isn't here to create fulfilled life or to progress or to live life to our potential. It's here to keep us alive and for safety. So when people understand that, you have to realize, I think most people have that scarcity because that is their normal, typical operating system. And if you're not aware enough to override it, you end up in a situation where you don't take risks. You plan, you never execute. And you continue to attract the same exact results of scarcity because essentially that's what you're broadcasting. You know, we talked a lot about energy and frequencies and kind of the spiritual side of success. And I really believe in that. I believe whatever you put out, whatever you're thinking, whatever you're vibrating, however you show up to the world, your worldview is typically what you're reciprocated back from the marketplace or the universe. And I feel like understanding that we have a 10,000-year-old brain that is meant to keep us alive and safety, not to allow us to thrive, you have to consciously be aware of that. So those times where you do feel that fear, the times where you do feel that uncomfortability or that insecurity, usually those are indicators that you're actually on the right path. You know,
I love that.
Imposter syndrome is something that I used to deal with a lot, and I imagine a lot of people do, whether it's trying to be a world-class fighter or trying to be a businessman or trying to do something big. And imposter syndrome, a lot of people frame that in a negative, but I believe it's actually a positive because that is an indicator letting you know that you're on the path to become someone that you're currently not. Therefore, you're feeling some type of way, but if you can stick with that emotion and that feeling and push through, they say the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. And I think eventually you could find some treasure on the other side of that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of a believer in fake it till you make it to a degree, because if you are actively pursuing a goal and you're not quite there yet, but you carry yourself with confidence that some people might not think is warranted based on what you could list on paper, isn't necessarily a bad thing because you believe in yourself. And you know that you are that type of person and it's only a matter of time until you execute. So I like that a lot. I like
act as is. Act as the person you want to become. And maybe it's a little cheesy, but that was such a good exercise when I was first coming up in my industry where I was insecure. I had the imposter syndrome. My parents always used to introduce me as the shy kid. So getting into the marketplace where you have to have uncomfortable situations, you have to bet on yourself, you have to risk it all for the biscuit per se. Acting as is, you're able to channel a way of being that maybe you aren't typically, but if you can access that long enough, that then becomes your set point. Then that becomes your operating system. You know, I imagine when you were first coming up in the MMA game, right? Maybe you didn't have the confidence of a world champion. Maybe you didn't have the belief that you could accomplish it, but acting as is and doing the things that reinforce that belief, eventually get there. And that becomes your new baseline.
I always say that fighters have to be somewhat delusional, because we have to believe that the impossible or next to near impossible can become true, like a reality. I mean, becoming a world champion in the UFC is such a slim odds of that ever happening. And yet every single fighter that fights today, I guarantee dreams about that. And some of them will accomplish it and some of them won't. But the point is the belief is there for every single fighter. We have to believe it. And it actually doesn't really matter whether it becomes true or not, in my opinion, because again, it's that self-belief that will propel you, if not to what you think that you want your destiny to be, it will still propel you to a destiny that is rewarding.
Bars.
Yeah. So my coach also used to say when I would get, every fighter gets nervous before a fight, but I've definitely over the years learned how to come to peace with the chaos, to find the comfort in the uncomfort. And although that might not make a lot of sense, my coach always used to say that the nerves and the anxiousness was my body telling me that I was ready. And that was a really important reframe for me, because as an athlete, or I think as anyone who's, trying to do big things or wants to be successful, or you're going into a big meeting, or you need to land this big contract and you're nervous about how you're going to accomplish that. Sometimes you need to take that reframe and say, the nerves are here to serve me. they are letting me know that I am ready for this opportunity. And I think that's kind of what you said a little bit there. And what I picked up on is my experience as an athlete and just as a person in general when I'm going for something that other people don't necessarily think is a good idea or possible. You know, I want to start a homeschool. I want to run a wedding venue out of our property in Boise. I want a homestead. I want to do all these things. And, you know, sometimes people are like, you know, how are you going to do that? And what are you, I was like, I will figure it out because I want to do it and I've set my mind on it, and I might not do it perfectly. And I'm sure the first year my goal is just to break even. Like that'd be great if I could just break even, but I'm going to do it. And I'm sure I'm going to fail a whole lot along the way, but I'm ready for that.
Yeah, I think too many people focus on the how when they try to accomplish something. How am I going to be a professional fighter? How am I going to retire my parents? How am I going to get out of all this crippling debt and eventually save enough for my college tuition? Whatever your goals, your desires are, too many people focus on the how. And the challenge about the how is no one knows how they're going to make it. No one knows how they're going to get from A to B. No one knows how, because chances are if you knew how, then you would already have the physical manifestation of what you want. The how doesn't matter. The how prevents people from taking action. What you need to focus on is the why. Why do I want this thing? Why do I want to retire my parents? Why do I want to be one of the greatest athletes in the world? Because if you can focus on the why, that creates abundance, that creates possibilities, that creates inspiration. And if you have a big enough why, you can accomplish any how. And I think so many people get stuck in almost like this quagmire because they're focusing on their radar screen of what they can see. They're looking at their current circumstances, their current possibilities, their current conditioning, their current worldview, and they're saying there's no way I can get out of this situation. There's no way I can be X, Y, and Z. When in reality, if you can stop focusing on that box, most of the magic that happens in life, at least in my experience, comes from outside of the radar screen. But if you're too tuned into the linear perspective of how you think you're going to get there, I think you miss a lot of the magic.
Yeah, absolutely. So that begs me to ask, not only how did you become successful? I want to know your background story. And then it begs me to ask, like, what was your why? And then how did you kind of get there?
Growing up, only child, living in Vegas. I moved here when I was 2 years old from New York. So basically raised in the 702. That's it. I've seen a lot, seen the city grow. But growing up, I always kind of knew I wanted to do big things. But most of the time it was around money. Both my parents combined made $40,000 in a year. My mom was an elementary school teacher. My dad was a security guard. So in the house, we had tons of love, tons of experience, but not much money. So I, growing up, remember that anytime money would come up, I would affiliate and associate pain with that. And Tony Robbins talks about it, either you're running towards pleasure or away from pain. I was running away from the pain. Mm-hmm. So when I became an adult, I said, okay, I don't really know what I want to do with my life. I didn't do great in high school, but I knew that I needed to do something different because I saw my parents grow up, work 40 hours a week for 40 years of their life and still struggling paycheck to paycheck. And I knew I didn't want that. So when I got to college, I bought into the whole college experience, that college is supposed to be the best 4 years of your life because that's what I was taught. None of my parents or grandparents went to college. I did a year here at UNLV and realized it wasn't for me. I remember being in my business class because I went to school for business because I didn't know what to do. And my, bless his heart, college teacher was making $60,000 a year teaching me how to run a business. So that was one big takeaway I had. If someone doesn't have the results in their life, they can't teach you how to get those results. You can't learn something from someone if they aren't experiencing the life. You should only trade places with someone if they have the actual results and the expertise or the area that you're trying to look in. So I ended up getting involved in network marketing, which was really my introduction to entrepreneurship. This was in 2012, so I was probably 22 years old. I didn't know anything about anything, but I started learning sales. I started learning communication. I started learning entrepreneurship. I started reading books. In college, I never read one book because I thought reading was dumb until I realized that leaders are readers and anyone that's successful in life knows something that you don't. Therefore, someone has dedicated their whole life's work and put it in a 150-page book, so you should probably read it. So I started to, condition my mind from the lack and the scarcity that came with my upbringing to then possibilities and what I can actually accomplish. My goal was always to retire my parents and buy them a house. That was really kind of my chief aim because we grew up in a 600 square foot condo and there just never was enough space to really, I feel like, enjoy our life to the fullest. So,
do you have siblings?
Only child. So
Okay.
it really felt on me. If it was meant to be, it was up to me. It was kind of the mentality that I adopted. So I got introduced to the door-to-door industry in 2015, knocking doors, which was pretty untraditional.
So you know the funny salesman? Are you
Yes.
familiar with
Yes,
him?
yes, yes.
Yeah, still follow him, but like a few years ago. But anyways, that's I always think of him when I hear door to door. But like somebody who really got creative and innovative, and I respect that.
The cleaning guy, right?
Yeah, the cleaning guy.
He's good.
Yeah, he's good, right?
He's good. So yeah, when I first got into the industry, I started watching stuff like him. But for me, Miesha, it was really, I just needed a vehicle to attach my ambition to. I knew I wanted these big things. I knew I wanted to change my life, my family's life, break generational curses, live life on my own terms. I just never really had the vehicle. And I thought if you didn't go to school to become a doctor, lawyer, surgeon, or you didn't grow up on that side of the street, you're doomed to be mediocre and live an average life. And it wasn't until I started to recondition my mind to realize like you don't have to be any of those things. You can actually create anything you want out of your life if you have the right work ethic, if you have the right information, and almost just as important, if you have the right vehicle. So that decision led to a 11-year career in direct sales, door-to-door solar. Started when I was 22 years old. I'm 32 now. And we just sold our company, a couple of weeks ago, which is awesome. But it's been really cool because I tell people that door-to-door sales, like from the outside looking in, it's kind of unorthodox and strange. But really what it is, for me at least, it's been a self-discovery program where I've been able to attach myself to this vehicle that has amazing mentorship, that you do something hard every single day in knocking doors, getting rejected, having self-discipline, working even when you don't want to. And that has helped me become an individual that is now worthy of the life that I get to live.
I love that. I believe in doing hard things. And I think you recommended The Comfort Crisis. I have it on Audible now. I'm actually reading a book just for enjoyment, Memoirs of a Geisha. It's actually the second time I read it. I read it once in college so long ago. I don't remember the details. So I just kind of been binge reading, and I've been excited about that book. So I've been kind of nosing book, but I do listen to audiobooks, and The Comfort Crisis it really sounded like it would resonate with me because I think that comfort is where our dreams and ambitions go to die. Honestly, I think you always have to have a level of discomfort to feel just I guess alive is the word that comes to me. It's not exactly what I mean, but I think that that can also be sometimes the problem with like getting ultra successful and then kind of like getting, like foot off the gas pedal and just kind of like it doesn't mean that you have to like still be in pursuit of more and more money. I mean, if you get to a point where you're comfortable in money and you've kind of accomplished those initial whys, then I think it's okay to do things like, I don't know, take your kids to visit an old folks home, or like go to the animal shelter and like foster a dog for a day, or like foster kids, like get involved in your community, like give back. But you've got to like find things to like stimulate your why and your purpose and your drive. Otherwise, I just think that when you get too comfortable, life gets boring and it doesn't feel worthwhile or fulfilling in the way that I think driven people appreciate.
Progress equals happiness. And that's something I didn't learn for years and years, where I thought materialistic, I thought money, I thought accolades, I thought achievement, like chasing the external would make me happy. But it really is when I'm progressing, that's when I feel the most alive. That's when I feel the most fulfilled. That's when I feel the most dialed in. I used to have this idea that I got during my network marketing time that I want to be 30 years old or 35 years old and retire. I want 6 Saturdays and 1 Sunday. I want to travel the world and be on beaches. And I quickly realized that would actually create misery in my life, because I feel like I need to be progressing, and that could be spiritually, that could be physically, that could be financially. In the 21st century, we tie a lot of our happiness, at least I do, to my business success. And that was something that I had to peel back the onion, because I would be super happy when sales were up and I would be super unhappy when sales weren't up. And I realized that is
familiar.
it's they call it the solar coaster, but the roller coaster of life. And that is not a healthy way to live life, because there's going to be ups and downs. Just like business, life is cyclical. There's seasons of harvest and there's seasons of winter. And if you tie your internal happiness to the external circumstances in your life, you're always going to be on that roller coaster, and it's exhausting. So really dialing in, like, what actually fulfills me, what actually makes me happy. And it doesn't have to be this esoteric, go meditate on a mountain for 6 weeks in silent, but it needs to be something that you get meaning out of. And I've learned that meaning is something that you can create. You know, the garbage man that gets true meaning from clearing up the trash and really helping out his community, like, he is fulfilled, he is happy. He could be happier than a lot of business people that don't have that same perspective when it comes to how they frame their work and how they frame their life and their purpose. So for me, progress has always equaled happiness, and the times where I'm the most fulfilled, when I'm the most locked in, are typically the times where I'm not looking so much at the scoreboard, but I'm looking at how much I've progressed from the previous week, the previous month, or the previous year.
Yeah, I think on my podcast, the note that your friend, what was his name again?
Daniel.
The note that he put down that he showed me was that I said, I've become effort-based instead of outcome-based in the sense of fulfillment and purpose. So it's like, if I put a lot of effort in something, I feel good about it, even if the results aren't exactly what I wanted, because I'm no longer tying my identity and worth to those. Just like you said with business, the roller coaster, that was cute, is fighting for me. I had absolutely tied all of my identity and value into wins and losses. It's a very black and white, clear way to distinguish whether you are doing good or you are doing bad, quote unquote. And I just want to say that just there's so much more to looking at life in a 2D framework. And you really have to get more than three-dimensional to really understand that we just have so much more that we can tie ourselves into. So I thought that was really great. Now about becoming financially free and stable, what are some key takeaways for the listeners when it comes to making the changes necessary, whether it's reframes or, you know, you're just like an average kid that came from an average kind of struggling blue collar family, and you've done great things and you're very successful. But I know that it wasn't just happenstance. I mean, you made decisions in your life. You decided to walk away from college, and you decided to learn from others, and you decided to really focus on stepping outside of the framework that you were kind of built inside of. So I want to know what steps you recommend people taking if they want to break free of the, you know, financial constraints that your standard day-to-day life would have it.
You need deep, deep desire. You know, Napoleon Hill talks about that. Desire is the starting point of all achievement. Like, I remember going to bed, waking up, skipping multiple Halloweens with my chief aim, my fixation on creating freedom. And unfortunately, in America, in the 21st century, money equals freedom. I had a bad relationship with money. I thought that rich people were evil. You have to lie, cheat, and steal. Money doesn't grow on trees. All these things that a lot of us that probably didn't come from an affluent upbringing have these programs and have these money blueprints, is what they call it, in their head. And until you address some of those, you can't go against your own belief system. How am I supposed to go out there and create wealth, create freedom, if I believe that in order to get that, I have to be a bad person, or I have to lie, cheat, or steal, or money is, to your earlier point, money is scarce? It's just not true. So first, you need a deep, deep desire. Second, you need a vehicle that you can really bet on yourself. If I read all the books and learned from my coaches and went to all the seminars and all the mentorship, but I was stuck in a vehicle or a job or a career where someone else dictated my worth, I'd be stuck. Money's not the most important thing in the world, but it's pretty up there with oxygen, unfortunately. And I think you need to learn how to make money. And just like everything else, money is energy. So I would tell your viewers is they need to get into some type of platform, some type of outlet, some type of vehicle where they can actually make more money, where there's no cap on their income. Your boss never is going to believe that you're worth more than you are. Therefore, you have to go bet on yourself. And maybe that is some type of business. Maybe that is online marketing. There's so many different ways today in 2025 that I didn't have when I first started in 2013 or 2012, when the social media boom was just starting to get going. So you need to start making more money. 6 figures, unfortunately, feels like the new benchmark. You know, 6 figure was my goal when I first got started in entrepreneurship. I thought that if I made $100,000 a year, I'd be able to travel the world and retire my parents and live life on my own terms. And this was back in 2018. I quickly realized that it's not a lot of money. In 2025, it's not a lot of money. So you have to be careful of the belief that you buy into when it comes to the amount of money, the amount of value that you're worth to the marketplace. So you need the desire, you need the vehicle, and then there's a concept that I really believe called the law of compensation, which I think basically dictates how much money you make. There's 3 aspects of it. I'll go through it real quick. Number 1, there needs to be a need for what you do. You need to be in some type of vehicle, some type of platform where there's a need for what you do. You need to be serving someone's need. In our life, the more value you add to the marketplace, the more value you add to more people, the more amount of problems you solve, the more amount of money you make. Second thing, depends on how good you are at filling that need. In my industry, it's very black and white. We're 100% commission in my business. Therefore, you mentioned Daniel, he's one of the top reps in the country. He makes close to 7 figures selling solar. There's other people in our same office that has the same resources, the same tools, the same platforms that make $70,000 a year. So why does Daniel make 10 times more than the other person that has the same opportunity, the same amount of time in a day, the same work ethic? Well, it's how good he is at filling that need. So it's getting competent, it's getting more skilled, it's studying your craft. Talent is naturally gifted, but skill is only developed from hours and hours and hours of beating on your craft. So go learn something that's valuable to the marketplace and actually go serve people. And then the final concept of this law of compensation is how replaceable you are to the marketplace. There's a great book called Lynchpin. I don't know if you've heard of that or read it, but
I haven't, but I've heard you talk about it on your other podcasts, which I think is really fascinating. Explain the concept of the linchpin. It's an important little piece, isn't it?
Yeah. So the linchpin is basically this little piece. Your viewers can Google it. And it goes into a wheel of a wagon. And this little screw that is removed, if it's removed from the wheel, the whole wheel falls apart. So the concept here is you want to become a linchpin in your business. You want to become a linchpin in your organization. You want to be a linchpin in your community and your family. You want to add so much value where just like the pin, if you're taking it out of the equation, the whole thing falls apart. Mm-hmm. I'd say, Miesha, part of the reason you're really successful in the community and obviously in your sport and now in your businesses is because you're invaluable. If you're taken away from the community or your family, there's going to be an impact. There's going to be a ripple where maybe a lot of people listening have entry-level positions or entry-level jobs. If you're fired or laid off tomorrow, the company doesn't even care about you. So how do you expect to earn massive compensation if you're so irreplaceable? So I think understanding that the amount of money you make is based on the value you add to the marketplace. How do you add more value? You become more valuable. You become more skilled. You work harder. You become kinder. You have a better attitude. You become more irreplaceable in your current space. And I think if you do that, you'll start creating ripples in the momentum of your making career.
I think that's all really... It's like such good advice. And it honestly, like when I hear you say it, I'm like, it sounds attainable. Like it really sounds like everybody could do this. So what do you think the biggest holdback is? Is it that scarcity mentality or are there other things that you find that are common roadblocks for people? And maybe, like, how do people get over it? Like, how do people start knowing that they can do difficult things? Like, where do you jump off? I mean, was it scary for you to stop going to college? Like, why did you do that? I mean, you mentioned, oh yeah, well, my teacher, I mean, sounds logical, right? He's teaching you business, but yet he's working a job that clearly, if he knew all of these things, wouldn't you think he would do something different? And hey, maybe he's just a super passionate guy that's like, I just want to live simple and I want to give back. And that's great and everything. But chances are, that's not always the case because there are a lot of really successful people who are also willing to give their time and their advice and to help you and to help other entrepreneurs, even in their own field. I mean, I really find a lot of successful people being great and kind. I mean, you're a great example. I mean, to have a free podcast that's really helping people understand how to break the mold. But why do people not do it? And what was it like for you to jump off? What were you thinking?
Yeah, I don't think they're clear on what they actually want. I think they're too concerned about what other people think about them, the opinions of others, or their beliefs are other people's beliefs, whether that's their parents' beliefs, whether that's their friends' beliefs, whether that's society or social media's beliefs on what they feel like their life should look like or where they should be in their life, that they're actually not clear on what they want. And a big way to get clear is just be in solitude. You know, we spoke about this on my podcast, but it's so important to just spend time with yourself, be with your own thoughts, and really get clear on what you want. I always knew, not always, but I knew from an early age that I wanted financial freedom and I wanted to take care of my parents. And that was my North Star. So any decision that was made revolved around that when it came to my business or my long-term decisions that were going to make a really important impact on my life. So I think people just aren't clear on what they want and they're not specific. If we go ask 100 people outside, hey, do you want to be successful? 100 out of 100 is going to say yes. If you ask them, why do you want to be successful? I'd imagine most of them couldn't actually give you a convicted reason on why they want to be successful because they never actually thought about it. Mm-hmm. Most people don't think. Thinking is one of the lost arts of this world. Because
the problem with school, to be honest, is they're busy teaching you not to think. They're busy teaching you to regurgitate.
Correct.
Yeah.
Which is bad because they're trying to create workers, not earners. So I think problem number one is most people don't think. So they don't actually know what they want. They're not clear. There's too much noise. They need to quiet the noise and actually figure out what they want their life to look like. The second step is they just need to execute and they need to take action. You know, there's a great thing that I learned early that ideas are worthless. We can sit here, Miesha, for the next 10 hours, lock ourselves in a room and talk about all the ideas that are going to change the world, that are going to change our life, that are going to change our businesses.
Feel so inspired.
And feel great. But how many are we going to actually execute on? Probably none. Most people, they are in love with all the ideas, but they don't actually execute. They don't actually take action. They don't follow through with the thing that they're going to say. And we talked a little bit about confidence. Most people aren't able to create financial success, not because they're not worthy. It's not because they're not good enough. It's not because they're not smart enough. None of those things, because there's plenty of examples of people that came from less, with less resources, less qualified, that have more than the individuals. But I think it's because they're really not willing to put themselves in a vulnerable situation long enough to really see what they're made of. And this goes back to what we were talking about earlier. Most people, they're comfortable in the situation they want, especially in America. In America, you can do very little and live a pretty comfortable life. But good is the enemy of great. Until the pain of change outweighs the pain of staying the same, nothing will ever change. If I'm someone that's comfortable with my life, I don't like how much money I'm making, but at least I know that it's there and that it's safe. I don't love my relationship. I'm not super fulfilled, but at least it's better than not having her. We get into this situation where we become content with our life. And the issue with contentment, until someone is in enough pain or inspired, most people aren't going to change. There's a story of an old man with a dog on a stoop, and there's a kid walking by the old man, and he heard the dog crying. So the kid walks up to the old man. They're like, hey, why is your dog crying? And then the old man responds to the kid, well, he's sitting on a nail. So the kid's like, well, that's weird. How come he doesn't move off the nail? And the old man responds, because he's not in enough pain. And I feel like that's what most people's situations are in America, and maybe most of the world. They're in a situation where they don't like. It's not comfy, but it's also not uncomfortable. They're not in enough pain to make a change. I've been doing the whole podcast thing for 2 years now. I've had 90 something guests, and it's interesting because the majority of the people that I listen to their stories who are quote unquote successful went through some type of pain. They went through some type of adversity. They went through some type of make it or break it, back against the wall moment, because they consciously put themselves there and they choose growth over comfort. And that decision led to a series of events that led to that individual, and now they're in a situation where they are today. And I just think most people are like that dog on the stool, where they're not happy with their situation, but they're not in enough pain to actually do something about it.
That's so powerful. I love what you said there, and I'm just like digesting it, because I'm like, I feel like that needs a moment to just settle in. It's so good. So we're gonna let that settle in. But
Thank you.
No, that's fantastic. And I want to ask you then, like, what was your pain? And what was your jumping off point? I mean, you mentioned, that finances were not a great point of conversation in your house growing up, but seems like maybe, you didn't mention anything that was super specific. You want to take care of your parents. That's great. What was that jumping off point for you?
It was actually my parents. I remember because we always had enough money to get by and have enough food on the table, never have to worry about like not missing a meal. There were definitely people in a lot worse situation, but I always knew that we were supposed to have more. And I remember vividly this memory where we were getting some money from my grandparents at the time. So I'm Jewish. My grandpa, my direct grandpa, was in the Holocaust way back when. He was a Holocaust survivor, which I think intrinsically also made me, as I got older, kind of have that grit a little bit more, where it's like, if he can go through this, I can go through this. You know, this guy's slamming the door.
These really can be passed down generationally. I mean, they have proven, scientifically that their trauma can be passed down. I think also so can, these certain things of like overcoming heart and self-belief. And that's why it's so important to try to shift that in ourselves so that we can also shift it in the future generations. So I do think that's powerful.
100%. So he passed away, I don't know, probably when I was like 19 or 20. And he was getting a check from Germany for being a Holocaust survivor. They give some of the survivors checks, and that check was really helping us, pay the bills, have enough money, and a little bit left over to do certain things. And when that check went away, things got really hard for a little bit of a season financially. And I remember being with my mom. Again, I'm an only child, so no brother, no sister, anything like that. I remember being with my mom, driving to one of those pawn places or one of those quick cash places, and we were going to go sell my Xbox or my PlayStation and some of her stuff. And I remember being in that car ride on the way there, not able to sell it because they didn't give us really anything for it, driving back to our condo. And I remember just being like, I don't want to be in that situation. Like, I don't want to be the family. I don't want to be the individuals that have to go to the pawn shop. And my mom was embarrassed because she's always had a lot of pride. And she was the type of person that would make sure that I had the new PlayStation, even if it meant her being a month late on the mortgage. And I just remember like getting to a point where this is when I first started getting into entrepreneurship. I was first starting to like create my self-image and starting to get a belief for myself. And I just remember like that being the moment where it's like, okay, like enough of this. I'm done. I don't know how it's going to happen. I don't know what it's going to be. I don't know what I need to do or who I need to talk to, but like, this isn't going to happen anymore. Like, I am not going to tolerate this. And shortly after that, probably like months after that, I got introduced to solar, and the rest was history. So you can call that, putting your flag in the ground and enough is enough, being sick and tired of being sick and tired. But I think we all have these crossroads that we go through in life. And maybe it's pain, maybe it's inspiration, maybe it's opportunity, maybe it could be a mix of different things, but we have these crossroads that we go to, and most of the decisions in our life aren't big decisions. Day by day goes by, but we don't really actually see the change until you look back a year, 5 years, 10 years. But there are these moments in life where you can either zig or you can zag, and there's not many of them, at least in my experience. And when those moments come, you want to choose growth. You want to choose inspiration. You want to choose the road less traveled. If you do in life what is easy, your life's going to be hard. If you do in life what is hard, your life is going to be easy. It could have been really easy to conform and go to college and do my whole fraternity thing and party and have a good time, which I did for a year. It could have been really easy not to do network marketing and have all my friends call it pyramid schemes and call me a loser for dropping out of college and go get a real job. Like, the easy route was to stick it through because that was what my peer group was telling me to do and what I was seeing in my reality. But I just had this intrinsic idea that like, I knew that if I took this route, maybe it wouldn't get me to where I needed to be immediately, but it was a step in the right direction. And eventually I'd look back and I would be very grateful for the decision I made. So I don't know if that was the breaking point, but that was a pivotal moment where I consciously made a decision. I think too many of us, we don't make actual decisions. Like, this is who I'm going to be. This is what I'm going to do. I'm not tolerating this anymore. And then once you make that actual decision, the rest is done, right? Like, once you make a conscious decision that this is how your life is going to be moving forward, and I'm not going to accept this anymore, it may take a little bit for the reality to catch up, but you're a new person at that point, and then you just got to wait for everyone else to catch up.
Yeah. I think I share some common ground in the sense, like, I remember too, also when you said the pawn shop, I was like, oh my gosh, I forgot about that. Like, my mom has definitely been to the pawn shop. Like, we, for the first couple years of my life, my mom was a single mom raising me on her own, and she struggled. And we had we we had a house. Still, my parents still live in the house actually. It was given down from my grandmother, but it was a real fixer upper. And so thank God for, some form of generational wealth. But the house was like the roof was leaking, 2-story house, and my mom was just struggling. She had no money to fix it up. But even the power got turned off. And I just remember being in a back room. I had cereal for like breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And we had one room, and she had a friend that worked for the electrical company. And so he would come over and like flip on the meter for us.
Hmm.
And it was like we just had to run the power like so minusculely that it wouldn't flip the power company to realize like we had our power
Stealing
meter back
power.
on. Yeah, essentially siphoning a little bit. Um, so we were like confined to the back study. We had like the bed set up in there. And I remember the rest of the house being so cold in the winter that I remember the toilet being frozen over and just being like a kid being like, whoa, like that's crazy, like, wow. Like I just remember that so visually. And I, at that point, I cannot even say that that was a turning point for me whatsoever, because as a kid, I didn't know any better and I thought it was cool. And my mom and I hung out and we told stories and it was great. Um, so it wasn't even like a hardship. I didn't feel it as a hardship. I had a lot of love in my family. Yeah, the rest of the house was cold, but yeah, we were fine. My mom and I, we were tight. We were good. But still, like it was a long road out from there. And my dad, who raised me, came from the military. He didn't make much money at first either, and so he got into the moving company, and slowly progressed. But it was hard there. My parents ended up having like 2 more kids, and it just was like just tough. And I remember at some point, as my dad was, I think, on the descent of his healing journey, like when you have to like go way down, sometimes you have to hit the rock bottom before you start to climb out.
Mm-hmm.
He was like on that, and he was working, but he wasn't really present. And we were struggling. And I remember feeling, I think this actually might have been why I gravitated towards wrestling and doing quote unquote more masculine sports, because I was the oldest child, but I was a girl.
Mm.
And I think I adopted kind of the oldest son's mentality, like similarly to what you had of like, okay, well, if anybody's going to save this sinking ship, it's got to be me. Like I'm the one who has to turn this around. And I don't think I conceptualized that, but I felt empowered by doing the things the boys were doing. And I just was like, I have to be strong and I have to be stronger than my circumstances. And this puts me in a position where I have to develop the strength. And so I gravitated towards that, and it made me feel confident and stronger in everything that I did, because I almost did nothing but fail when I showed up on the mats. I mean, there was very little I was successful at except making it to the end of practice. Like that was the win for me, because I certainly wasn't good at anything else, at least to start with. But adopting that mentality and kind of just being like, I'm going to be the one to, to take care of my mom. And my mom was my goal at that point. It's just interesting how it kind of sent me down that trajectory of being an athlete and being successful, but also learning how to do hard things and then setting goals for myself. And I remember my dad came down to visit me in Sacramento, and I was living in an apartment, and I was just showing him around, and he walked into the bedroom, and he saw a list that I had written out of my goals and the things that I really wanted to accomplish. And I wish I still had the list, because he's asked me a couple times, like, do you still have that list? That was really impactful. He's like, because I remember you've actually accomplished quite a few of those things. I don't know if I knew my how or my why, but at least I was setting the goals. And it wasn't till later, I think, that I started to develop more of what you're talking about. I started with goal setting, but that's very incomplete. You could set goals all day long. I know lots of people who set goals all day long, and oftentimes they're very unrealistic.
Mm-hmm.
For example, my mom's been struggling a little bit with her health, and she's like, I want to get in the hyperbaric chamber 5 days a week. And I'm like, Mom, you never get in the hyperbaric chamber.
We'll start with 1.
Yes. Okay. So you guys like, Mom, let's start with, I said, let's start with 3. And if you can do 5, great. But the point is I've learned that you want to set all kinds of goals, but you really want, you want your long-term goals, your midterm goals, and your short-term goals, but you want them to be attainable and hopefully where you can even surpass them. that's my theory on it. And I'm not talking about dreaming. I'm not talking about like I want to do great things. I'm talking about tangible. I'm going to do this within this week. This is my 7-day goals. Don't say you're going to be perfect. Like 7 out of 7 days, I'm going to work out. And 7 out of 7 days, I'm going to drink 60 ounces of water. And 7 out of 7 days, I'm going to, do all these things. And then you fall short of it and you're like, oh, I'm worthless. Oh, I'm a loser. Oh, I can't accomplish my goals. And you start to get in this mindset of that you're failing because our brains, again, going back to that primal brain, are wired to keep us safe. And we get safety and negativity kind of intertwined, I think, in our domestic brains of what we've taken ourselves out of the primal need for the most part. And now we're just trying to find purpose and success. So my recommendation to people is dream big, but set realistic goals and just things that you can be consistent about. 1 day a week is great. 3 days a week is great. 7, maybe you're David Goggins. Like
8 days a week.
That's
David Goggins.
8 days a week. That's cool. But I think it is important to feel accomplished. And when you accomplish the goals that you set, it shifts something into you, like mentally and spiritually. It changes the way that you view yourself. I am someone who can accomplish the goals that I set out for myself.
I agree. And that's how you transform your life. It's step by step. It's goal by goal, because to your point, what I've realized is what is different from the Steven today than it is 10 years ago. Circumstance-wise and external, a lot, in terms of the actual materialistic but really it's a reflection of my internal. It's a reflection of my confidence, my ability to shift when I'm negative, my ability to separate stimulus from response. Like most of the shifts that happened externally first have to happen internally. But the crazy thing is the external also reinforces the internal. So there were so many times on that journey of success. I don't think to success. I don't think success is a destination. Journey of success, because it's a becoming in the process, was okay. I have low self-esteem. I have no money. I have a negative paradigm when it comes to X, Y, and Z. I have a bad money blueprint. Like, let me just start taking the first step. Okay. This guy says I need to read book. I'm going to read 5 books, 5 pages, not 5 books, 5 pages a night. Perfect. Boom. That just gained a little bit of confidence. And then you start creating that momentum and you start doing these little things consistently. And then you look up and you're like, oh man, I feel different. I'm a different person because I'm saying what I want. I know what I want. I'm declaring it, and I'm actually doing the things that will get me there. And you start to build that self-image, that self-esteem, that self-confidence. Everyone talks about in success, you got to be confident. You got to be confident. Like, what is confidence? Confidence is just self-trust at the end of the day. Miesha, if I tell you, hey, I'm going to be here for the podcast and I no-show you, what did you just do? You just lost trust that I could follow through in what I said. Well, what happens if you tell yourself something and you don't follow through? You just lost trust that you're not someone that follows through with the commitments that they say. You're literally chipping away at your confidence. And once you start doing that, it's a slippery slope. So when you get to the big decisions of, man, I have this opportunity in front of me where I can go make more money.
I don't know if I'm going to show up for myself.
Why would I take this? Now I'm fearful. Now the anxiety starts to pop up because you look at the past resume of your life and you don't have a credible resume for your own life. So it's so important, based on what you're saying, to have goals, have things that you want to do, have a vision for your life, and then start slowly chipping away. People overestimate what they can accomplish in 1 year and underestimate what they could accomplish in 5 years. Everyone gets fired up on these New Year's resolutions, right? We're coming up on January here soon. I'm going to change my life. I'm going to make $1 million. I'm going to travel the world. I'm going to do all these things, right? People go crazy. And then the statistics show by, late January, early February, 95% of people stop. The better frame, the better perspective is, I'm going to focus on these few little things that are going to make an improvement in my life. I'm going to focus on going to the gym 2 more times a week than I did last year. I'm going to focus on reading 1 more book a quarter than I did last year. I'm going to focus on not allowing that thing that used to trigger me for 2 weeks straight. And by doing that, you start to build a new self and a new identity and a different confidence. And then that compounds into hopefully something great. At least for me, it did.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's funny when I don't make it to the gym as often as I used to. Okay, I will admit that. I'm okay with that. I like that I'm shifting, and I like what you said about I want to read one more book than I'm doing, or I want to do a little bit more of what I'm doing. But you can also take something that you've been doing that you're good with off the plate and put something else in its way to like challenge you in a new scope. And that's also something that I've realized because I'm not always able to add to. Like my plate is usually 99% full. So there's very little room sometimes for me to constantly add without sacrificing the personal time that also makes me feel happy and like I should be able to just sit down for like 30 minutes and read Memoirs of a Geisha and just get lost in it for no other purpose than it makes me happy. Or garden, or, like collect my chicken eggs, or you name it, like whatever the little thing is that kind of makes me go sit out in the sun for 20 minutes. So without like cutting myself too thin on those things or losing sleep over it, you don't always have to add. Sometimes you're like, you know what? I'm really happy with the amount of you name it, books I've read or whatever. So I think what I'm going to do this time is I want to write my own book. I'm going to take those time that I would have spent reading the 5 pages or the 10 pages or whatever, and I'm going to take notes. I'm going to write things down or whatever it is. That's just one example, but it's okay to also like shift outside of that and expand and change your goals depending on where you feel the universe and yourself conspiring together is pulling you. And that's also something that I've learned because I used to try to just add. And as an athlete, it's really easy to want to do that. And we tend to overtrain. We will be like, okay, last camp, I trained 4 hours a day, every day, 7 days a week. And I think it worked. And this camp, I'm going to do 5 hours a day. Okay. And it worked. And the next camp, 6 hours, and it doesn't work because it's too much. So I think there's a good fine balance to that as well. What are your thoughts?
More isn't always better. I used to be the person, not professional athlete, but trying to be a professional door-to-door direct sales business entrepreneur guy, that I needed to work all the time. If I thought about anything other than work, that my competition was better than me, or I was falling behind, or I wasn't doing the thing that was going to get me to where I wanted to go. And it's not true. I think in America specifically, we have so much of that more mentality, that accomplishment paradigm, which we just spent the first 30, 40 minutes of this podcast talking about how it's important to have accomplishment. It's good to make progress. It's great to go after your goals and actually achieve something so you can put yourself in a position of leverage to actually live life on your terms and not anyone other's terms. But just like anything, too much of anything isn't always good. Like there are a lot of successful businessmen and entrepreneurs and fighters and you name it that are not happy and they're not fulfilled and they don't like who they see at the other side of the mirror. And that's because they are compromising things that are important to them for something that isn't important to them. Maybe their friends told them that something's important to them. Maybe their family, maybe their business partner did. But if you don't wake up feeling good, I sparingly use the word fulfilled because I think that can mean different things to different people as well. But if you don't feel grounded and aligned and centered, that means that you're off base. And that means that there needs to be a level of recalibration that needs to happen in your life. And a lot of it is not knowing your values. I did a value kind of workshop a couple of years ago that was really powerful, where I realized that my number one value, I thought it was growth. I thought it was accomplishment. It's not, it's peace. And until I realized that, I kept doing things to get more, to your point, just like overtraining. Maybe it's overworking. Maybe it's sacrificing time with the people I care about, thinking that I'm doing it for them when in reality I was doing it for myself. And I had to realize that, no, it's not any of that. It's peace. And then you start to optimize for what you actually want. Then an extra $100,000 a year, an extra sale, an extra responsibility, you can then confidently, convictively say no to because you actually know what you're trying to optimize for. Where if you don't, you're just going with the punches and you're after the Jones. You want a nicer house, a nicer car, a nicer watch, more status, nicer vacation, more recognition. And just like anything, it could be toxic. So I think the takeaway there is optimize for what you actually want. Like, what are your values? What are you trying to create? What do you want your life to look like? and then take that, reverse engineer it, and don't allow other people's perspective, values, or ideas of what their worldview should look like to negatively impact yours, because more isn't always better.
Yeah. Peace doesn't have a price tag. Can't buy it. So you can have all the things. You can get everything and all the money and the wife and the house and the kids and the dog and the white picket fence, and you could have zero peace. That's the truth.
Sometimes you have to get there to realize that.
Yes. And
People
sometimes
can-
you have to get the other way to realize it too. You know, there's two ends of the spectrum, and I'd like people to be able to figure it out in the comfortable middle. But the truth is, there is power in struggle. Yeah. And I think it's good for all of us, because when you have that struggle, you learn about yourself. That if you can learn and believe and have the confidence, like you were talking about, that you will show up for you, everything is less scary. Yeah. Your thoughts on that?
So you versus you. That's really it. You know, it's not you versus the marketplace. It's not you versus your competitors. It's not you against your boss. It's not you against the opponent standing on the other side of the octagon. It's you versus you. There's an ancient proverb. It says, if there's no enemy inside, the enemy outside can do you no harm. And self-mastery is an inner game. I've really been flirting with this idea of mastery and what it actually takes to be masterful at something, especially in today's world where you see all the gurus and the social media coaches and everyone flexing their Lambos and the Miami fitness training culture, all these things. And it's like, that's not mastery. And that's okay, you know, if you're just trying to make a quick buck. But like, what is actual mastery? Mastery is dedicating yourself to your craft so much that you almost get lost in it. And I think too many people aren't trying to go for mastery. And maybe it's not for everyone, but at least for me, if I'm going to dedicate my life to something, for me specifically, it's been this direct sales arena, public speaking, or that whole arena. Like, I'm going to go for mastery, because I think at the end of that comes with deep purpose, deep meaning. And I think you find yourself on the other side. I said this earlier, but I really do think entrepreneurship, if done right, is a personal development program with a compensation plan attached to it. And you shouldn't get into something like this just to make money, because that is a very artificially, and as soon as you go up against a big enough wall, you're not going to have enough resolve in order to get through it, because you have a very shallow reason for doing what you're doing. You need big reasons in order to accomplish big goals. But I think for most people, they need to get into something that is going to challenge themselves. They need to get into something that is going to push them past what they're currently experiencing, because on the other side of that is the version of themselves that they can only peek into on the other side of doing something that you commit your full heart to. And we live in America, and there's never been more opportunity out there. There's never been more resources. There's never been more access to podcasts like these and social media and being able to get around the right people and the right opportunities. Yet there's probably the least amount of action that I've seen in a really long time. And I think it's because there's two sides of the coin. It's either people that are overachievers, that are more, that are just looking for that next dopamine hit for accomplishment or recognition or that new car, that new house, which is fine if that's the race that you're on. Or on the other side of the coin, there's people that have kind of just given up and that have accepted their reality. They're creatures of them circumstances versus creators of them circumstances. And both, I'm not a judge, they're both equally or unequally good or bad. But I think trying to kind of blend those together where you can really enjoy your life and prioritize the things that are important to you, whether that's experience and wander, whether that's your family, whether that's your kids, whether that's your business, but also not get too lost in the capitalist more. At least that's what I'm trying to optimize for. 12 years into this, having a little bit of financial success compared to the full spectrum, I've realized I don't really know if I want to be a billionaire or 100 millionaire. Like, it sounds cool. It sounds like a new trophy or a new title, or it sounds like a great thing to flex at a dinner table or something like that. But like, I don't know if I'm willing to sacrifice the things that are important in my life in order to get there. And there's not one right way to live your life or do life. as long as you're doing what you need to and you have the resources and the flexibility to actually live life on your own terms and do the things that you enjoy. But I've realized that there's no solutions in life. There's only trade-offs. And I think people need to really look at their life, look at their future, look at the things that they want, and see what trade-offs they're willing to make if they want to get to where they want to go.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I want to talk about goals a little bit more, because we talked about it, and we talked about some do's and some don'ts, but like, you've talked about auditing goals a little bit. Can you elaborate a little bit on how you're actually tracking whether your goals are being accomplished? Like, what does that system look like for you?
Writing your goals is the first step, right? I believe every great thing happens 3 times. First in the mind, then on paper, and then in reality. So paper to pen, I think something magic happens. From a neuralistic standpoint, there's a lot of neural pathways that go off in your brain when you actually write something versus type something. My handwriting's awful. I hate writing. My high school and middle school teachers used to criticize me all the time. They say I'd be a doctor. Not a doctor, but I have a handwriting like a doctor, but I have to physically write because it triggers certain things in your brain that other things don't. So writing it down is the first step. I have whiteboards. I like whiteboards. I like the vision boards and all the things. I like having my goals around me so I can see the affirmations. I have a mantra next to my bed that I've read for close to 10 years now. So I'm big on...
What's the mantra?
It's basically a 2-paragraph mantra from Think and Grow Rich. It's the money formula, I believe it's called. Basically, it just reinforces a certain amount of money or a certain lifestyle that you want to live, and basically will sacrifice the achievement.
I love mantras, and I usually come up with them myself. But real quick, like how we were talking about showing up for yourself. If you're not used to that, if you're not being a good best friend to yourself, if your internal voice is negative and puts you down, like you're not good to yourself, and you've got to start to change the way that you talk to yourself. And I think a mantra can be a great point of like turning that around for yourself, especially when you're fighting yourself. You said you versus you. It's so true. It's not the person standing across the octagon from me or my partner in training or whatever. It is about me rising to the occasion that I know I can, about me showing up for myself. And I'll come up with these mantras during my training camps and even just in life, but I tend to lean very heavily into them when, I know that I have like this date and this opponent and this, everyone's going to be watching. So I'm very focused on it. But I think in talking to you, I'm inspired to use the mantras a little bit more, and it could be something like, I will show up for myself, or I deserve this, or I am great. I will do this. I am this, these kinds of things, because when you get to the point where it's really difficult, you need to know that you will show up for yourself, and having that mantra and pushing yourself beyond where the point of comfort has allowed you. I just think there's so much opportunity for growth there. So anyways, I like mantras, and I like them, I think, for our internal dialogue, to switch that around, to put power back into our stance as we move forward towards our goals. When you're auditing these goals, and don't expect that you're going to be perfect in it. That's okay. You're showing up for yourself.
Yeah, it's huge. And I think, are the 2 most powerful words in the English dictionary. I am confident. I am abundant. I am X, Y, and Z. It's such a good pattern interrupt, because to your point, we're naturally conditioned to think of the negative more than the positive. So you need certain self-talk that will interrupt your normal operating system,
Yes.
right? Most people, they run on kind of like this hamster wheel of negativity and doubt and fear and lack and what if and why this and why me and victim. And it's like, you need certain things to break that pattern to start getting the hamster off of the wheel. And that's really what goals do for me. They just keep me dialed and focused and in the right vibration to the things that I want to do. Whether that's writing weekly goals, monthly goals, quarterly goals, yearly goals, whatever, I think you should do all of it. But it's really about just keeping things on the forefront of your mind. The unconscious mind doesn't know the difference between what's real and what's fallacy, right? That's why all these gurus talk about, you want vision boards and the law of attraction and all these things. What really happens there is the unconscious mind. There's a great book, The Power of the Unconscious Mind, but it doesn't know the difference between what is real and what's fallacy. So if you tell yourself a lie enough, you actually do believe it, and you start to look at that in the real world. There's a thing called the RAS, which is called the reticular activating system, which sounds like a big word, but I'm a 2.7 GPA college dropout, so don't let it overwhelm you. But the thought here is your RAS is basically the part of your mind that you can program to start seeing the world a different way. I'm sure we've all heard of the analogy whenever you start shopping for a new car, right? You get this red Tesla, right? You buy a red Tesla, and then all of a sudden you see all red Teslas all over the place. Or it's the reason why you can hear your name from the other side of a crowded room over anyone else. It's because your RAS is so programmed for your name or for that specific car that literally your senses start to pick up on all these cues that have always been there, but because there's so much information coming in, our brain has to filter things that are important to us, and that's what the RAS does. So if we can, again, optimize for what we want, not what we don't want, who we want to become, a certain money target, a certain goal, a certain income, a certain car, that's when all these visualization things stop becoming so esoteric and woo-woo and actually start being science, because it's literally your brain, that RAS, starting to identify all the things that are already there, but it starts to kind of zoom in on the things that you want.
Yeah, so good. I know we're getting towards the end of this here. This has been fantastic, but you said something in one of your podcasts that I thought was really, it was powerful, and it was kind of like, it was kind of a light bulb moment. I was like, he's right. You said that poor people pay for liability and rich people pay for assets that pay for liability. That's like kind of a little pivot, a little change, but I really do want people to take away in this podcast how they can financially, breathe life into their financial situation and really get to where they want, because it is nice, right? Having money makes life easier. It makes it more enjoyable. It allows you to get to the point where you can do the things that make you feel good, not just the things that you have to do. And when you are financially constrained, a lot of times you are stuck in a rut doing the things that you have to do, and you have very little room for the things you want to do. So when you said that, I was like, that is so true. And that is a common hardship here in America, potentially other countries too, but I see it here. What did you mean by that? And what do you see the rich doing that the poor are not?
Couple things there. Your income is always going to be your number one wealth building tool. 100%. Can't save yourself to wealth by you skipping Starbucks 3 times a week, by you cutting your Netflix subscription. It's not going to make you wealthy. So you got to work on income. That's step number one. Step number two is you got to get clear on what your actual financial freedom target is. It's different for a lot of people. For some people, it's a lot. For others, it may not be as much as you think. So an exercise that I have my sales guys do, it's like, okay, what is your financial nut? Right? What's all your overhead, all your expenses, your health insurance, your alimony, your whatever all your expenses are. Write that number down, right? Maybe it's 10 grand, maybe it's 15 grand, maybe it's 5 grand, maybe it's 3 grand.
Is that like the bare minimum of living, or just kind of like what it costs to live the lifestyle that you're currently adhering to?
Your bare minimum currently.
Okay.
So the amount of money you need every month to keep the bills on, keep the lights on, keep the bills going, so on and so forth. Once you get to that number, now you know essentially what your freedom target is, because most people, they don't want money just to have nice things and live a cool lifestyle. Most of them want it to be quote unquote free. So what is freedom? Freedom for me is doing what you want, whenever you want, whoever you want, and not having to answer to anyone. That was always my target. I didn't want to be under the thumb of a boss who bossed me around, or I never wanted to have to answer to people. I wanted to live life on my terms. If I wanted to take a vacation for 3 months with my fiance, I could do it without having to worry. And that takes time to get to, but that should be people's target if they want that life. So knowing what that number is, then it's okay. I need to make enough money every single month that I can obviously start to invest into assets that are going to cash flow to then get to that number. Okay. So an asset, very simply, an asset is something that makes you money and that usually appreciates. A liability is something you spend money on that usually depreciates. Car, liability. Real estate property that's cash flowing, asset. So the idea here is, say that number is $10,000 a month, Miesha. That's the amount of money that you need every single month, where if you had $10,000 a month of recurring income coming in, then you could literally do whatever you want. Your bills are paid. You can go to Bali and screw off for 6 months or whatever you want to do. Now the number is, okay, how do I make enough money where then I can start investing X amount to then hit that $10,000 number? At that point, poor people, they're spending, and poor, there's a difference between being poor and broke. I've been broke. I've never been poor. Broke is temporary. Poor is a mindset. Poor is passing over opportunities repeatedly. So it's okay to be broke, temporary pain. It's not okay to stay there and become poor, because that's a mindset you adopt. So figure out what that number is, and then just start investing into assets. Start dollar cost averaging into the stock market. There's a concept from a great book. It's called The Richest Man in Babylon, very similar to The Alchemist, but it comes to financial literacy and not, manifestation. But it talks about the idea of paying yourself first. Most people, especially in America, they pay everyone else first. They pay their bills first. They pay their taxes first. They pay their girlfriend Sephora habits first. They pay their whatever their vices are first, and then they spend first, and then they invest later. I'm not saying don't pay your taxes, everyone, but I am saying, what if you would invest first, put money away first, right? Pay yourself first, and then pay everything else after. And I already know what your viewers are thinking. They're like, well, Steven, I barely have enough money to pay my bills now. How am I supposed to pay myself first? My argument would be, if the federal government tomorrow said, okay, because of everything going on with tariffs and Trump and everything going on international, we have to tax everyone an extra 10 to 15% on their income. What would you do? Well, you either move out of the country, or you would adapt and be flexible and figure out a way to continue to live your same lifestyle while giving the government the extra 10 to 15%. My invitation is, don't wait for the government to tell you to do that. How come you can't do that yourself? How come you can't make money? If you're in a fixed income job, that's okay. Hopefully you're in a job where you can kind of create your own income, where it's performance-based, but if not, that's okay. Put away 10 to 15% and then live to spend your life. You do that consistently, you're going to wake up a year from now with a little bit of a nest egg, and then you can start deploying that into real estate. You can start deploying that into a stock that's going to pay dividends. And then you simply just reverse engineer what amount of money you need invested to produce that $10,000 a month income. May take you a year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, but at least now you have a target, you have a plan, and you can start taking action in that direction to start hitting that financial freedom number. And the crazy thing that happens, Miesha, is when you actually have a purpose for doing what you're doing, everything else gets enjoyable. I tell my guys, there's a difference between knocking doors or selling deals or showing up to meetings just to show up to meetings. Imagine knocking doors or showing up to meetings or selling deals, because every door you knock, every meeting you get to, you're getting that much closer to getting that first rental property, that much closer to retiring your parents, that much closer to putting away enough money for your college tuition for your future kids. And when you attach meaning to doing what you're doing, things become a lot lighter, and I think they've become a lot easier to obtain. I hope that answered your question.
That was fantastic. That was exactly what I was looking for. I think that's great. I don't think I have any other questions really. I mean, I feel like you have done such a great job of breaking down the all-encompassing from really top to bottom, and including sharing your struggles, which I greatly appreciate. So is there anything else that you think that is important to know, or that the listeners, is there a piece of advice that we could leave everybody with?
I'd say just stay on the path. Like if you're on the path of adversity, if you're on the path of challenge, if you're on the path of trying to do something that maybe your friends or your peers or your coworkers or your colleagues think is strange or think is uncomfortable, it probably means you're on the right path. Most of society, unfortunately, is on a path to mediocrity. A mentor once told me earlier in my career, he said, Steven, if you want to be successful, it's very simple. All you got to do is look at what 95% of the people are doing in this world and do the complete opposite. And I thought about that for a second. I was like, well, that's kind of mean, but it's also really true. Like if you look at most people out there, of course, not people, viewing and listening to your podcast, Miesha, but most people out there, they've kind of accepted life as it is. They've accepted the cards they're dealt. They're conforming to what society tells them they are, where they're probably not in the best health condition. They're probably not in the best financial position. They're probably not super stoked about their life and their lifestyle and their relationships. And they've kind of just accepted that because that's the hand they were dealt, and they just don't believe they can change it. And my, I guess, parting advice would be you can change it. You literally can wake up tomorrow. Human beings, the only difference between us and any other living creature on the planet is we have the ability of choice. We can wake up one day and decide we want to live the next half of our life completely separate from the first half of our life. We can wake up and make a decision to do things completely different, to lose 30 pounds, to get in shape, to start a new career or a new hobby or a new relationship or move to a new place. Like, we're not birds. You don't have to just live in the same place continuously. So that would be my advice. Change if you're not happy. And if you are happy, double down on what makes you more happy.
Let's go. I love it. Thank you so much. This has been a fantastic episode. I appreciate you being here, and look forward to running into you again here at the studio that we both record at.
Thanks, Miesha. Happy to be here.
Alrighty. Bye.